Hello, everyone. Welcome to another segment of intellectual brainstorming and academic excellence. My name is David Oying, and my YouTube channel is David Oying. I want to use this medium to say a very big thank you to those of you that have been subscribing to our channels. And if you have not done that, we want to use this medium to encourage you to subscribe to our channel. And apart from subscribing to our channel, you can leave your comment on how to serve you better. And apart from that, you can also click on the notification button so that anytime we have a video, you'll be the first person to receive this video. Now, today we're going to look at something different, something extraordinary, something unique, something that can benefit you one way or the other. And that topic that we're looking at is what is called mercantilism. 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 This topic is very interesting. In fact, I can remember when I was in university, I so much love this topic. It is under a topic, it's actually under political economy. So the era of mercantilism is what we're going to look at today. Now, what do we mean by mercantilism? When you're talking about mercantilism is an economy theory. It is actually an economic theory. So that is the first thing that you should note. It is actually an economic theory. And as an economic theory, it seeks to promote government regulation of international trade to generate wealth and strengthen national power. To generate wealth and strengthen national power. If you could remember, when we're talking about power, power means the ability to control the actions of others through the possession of what is called the sanction. So when you're talking about power, every nation desires power, and there's what we call national interest. So if you're talking about mercantilism, it's actually an economic theory that seeks to promote the regulation of international trade by a particular government or country to generate wealth and to strengthen this national power. So mercantilism seeks to reduce trade deficits and to create what we call a surplus. It seeks to eradicate or to reduce what we call trade deficits and create a surplus in an economy. Now, mercantilism as a form of economic nationalism funds corporate, military, and national growth. So when you're talking about national power, you are not talking about the economy alone. You're talking about funding of corporate growth and also promoting national and military growth. So it advocates or promotes trade policies that will promote what we call domestic industries. So under mercantilism, government strengthens the private sector or private owners or factors of production. And when you talk about the factors of production, you are talking about entrepreneurship, capital goods, natural resources, and what we call labor. So don't forget, these things are very, very, very important. We are talking about what we call entrepreneur, capital goods, natural resources, and labor. So mercantilism establishes what we call monopolies, grants what we call tax-free status, and grant what we call pensions to favor the industries. It imposes what we call trade tariff on imports. So it promotes trade tariffs on what we call imports. It does not allow what we call anything that will help foreign companies. So you can now see that when you talk about nationalism, it is actually an economic policy. That is meant to favor the government of a particular country, to eradicate trade deficit, to remove trade imbalances, to promote national power. Now, let us now quickly look at what we call the history of what we call mercantilism. Now, mercantilism, was promoted, or it actually came into force between 1500 and 1800. So for the period of 300 years, mercantilism was was the dominant economic theory in Europe at that time. So mercantilism was the dominant economic theory in Europe between the period of 1500 to 1800. So country wanted to export downward than import. So mercantilism will promote what we call what? Export at the expense of what we call what? Import. It will promote what? Export at the expense of what? Of import. Now, in return for this, they receive gold. That is, those countries that are engaged in mercantilism, gold was one of the important factor that was used as the measurement of what? Of mercantilism. So, the country that has the highest numbers of gold at that time was the most powerful or one of the most economically prosperous economy at that time. So this power nation state, they came out from the ashes of what? Of feudalism. And what we are talking about, what do we mean by feudalism? When you're talking about feudalism, we are talking about an economic, we are talking about a system that is based on the hierarchical ownership of land. From the feudal, from the kings to the vassals or to the proletariat. So when you're talking about a feudal system is the hierarchical ownership of land between the serfs and the what? And the kings at that time. So feudalism emerged from the ashes of what? Of mercantilism. Now, what are the countries that are actually what promoted the mercantilism or that were practicing mercantilism at that time? Holland, France, Spain, and England. They were these countries that actually what promoted what we call mercantilism. Now, when you talk about Holland, Spain, and England, they were competed on what? On the economic and the military front. These countries created skilled labor and armed forces. Before that, people focused on their local town, kingdoms, and religion. Each municipality levied their tariffs on what? On goods that pass through their borders. So at that particular period of time, mercantilism seems to promote a situation where everything that passes, whether between France, Spain, or Holland or England, they have to pay for it. Now, in my previous topic, I mentioned what we call the Westphalia. I said the emergence of states, started as a result of the Westphalia Treaty of 1648. So the emergence of states started what? With the Westphalia Treaty of what? Of 1648. Don't forget that. Now, the nation state began with the Treaty of what? Of Westphalia. It ended the 30 years war between the Roman Empire and the various German groups. Now, the advent of what? Of industrialization and capitalism set the stage for mercantilism. Now, when you talk about industrialization, you can remember there was a time in Europe that slave trade was the real thing. But along the line, industrialization came into force. And because of industrialization, the demand for slaves was removed. It reduced to the barest minimum. So the advent of industrialization and capitalism set the stage for mercantilism. Now, because of the removal of the slow pace of slave trade at that time, that was necessitated as a result of industrialization, European market had to seek for new markets outside the Europe. So industrialization and capitalism, and capitalism actually set the pace for what we call mercantilism. So this phase strengthened the need for a self-governing nation to protect what we call business rights. Now, mercantilism that we're talking about here depended on colonialism as the government would use military power to conquer foreign lands. The businesses would exploit natural and human resources. The profits fueled from further expansion, benefiting both what the merchant and what and the nation. So mercantilism worked hand in hand with what with the gold standard, with the gold standard. So countries paid with each other in gold for export. The nation with the most gold were the richest nation, just like I said before. The nations that had what the highest number of what of golds were actually what the richest nations. They could hire mercenaries and what and explore to expand their empires. They also funded wars against other nations who wanted what to exploit them. As a result, all countries wanted a trade surplus rather than a deficit. And that is what mercantilism is what it's talking about. So mercantilism relied on what? On shipping. Control of the world of the waterways was vital to national interest. So when you talk about mercantilism, the country that adopted mercantilism must actually control the waterways. And by controlling the waterways, they were able to maintain that security one way or the other. So, mercantilism is actually, a system that was meant to promote what we call trade surplus as against the trade deficit. And as a result of that, it made some nations to be very, very rich at the expense of some other nations. And mercantilism, like I said, was as a result of industrialization and capitalism. And don't forget that the epoch of human history started from the epoch of what we call the slavery, down to feudalism, down to capitalism, down to socialism, and what? And down to communism. Now, according to Karl Marx, he said that the desire for man to exploit his fellow human being or the personal aggrandizement or selfish nature of man to dominate his neighbor or to dominate his environment led to what? To the epoch of human history. And according to him, there will be a time where capitalism will be overthrown by what? By socialism. And when you talk about socialism, we are talking about the rise of the middle class. Under capitalism, you have what? The higher class. But according to socialism, the middle class are going to rise up against what? Against the higher class. Thereby creating what we call what? A classless society. A classless society. So when a classless society is what is created, then you cannot have what we call communism. But unfortunately, this process or these dreams or these aspirations or this theory has not what actually taken place. So, mercantilism seeks to promote what we call surplus as against what? Deficit. And gold was the standard measurement at that time. And countries that deals with this gold were actually what the richest countries under mercantilism.